all is important to us.
Hello and welcome to tonight's show.
You've arrived at your destination. Connecting.
Hi guys, welcome to Glitching the Code here on iconic.com. I'm here with a new guest, Allan Stevo. Allan reached out to us to do some interviews as well. He's the director of My Body, My Choice, a California Health Freedom Organization, and the author of his new book, Face Masks Hurt Kids. Lots of interesting topics to get into, Allan, but the first thing I want to speak to you about is you're older, you're in your late teens or early 20s, I believe, when you went to the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, hard to say, and a former communist country. A lot of people, myself included, sometimes get the lines blurred between what fascism, communism, and any other ism is. So what is the difference between fascism and communism?
You know, I think it's good. I think it's good to generally say is a school of thought, is it looking at how to empower a group of people, the interest of a group of people over the interest of an individual. I think that's an important place to be thinking, because what inevitably happens when you do that is some individuals in the group have more say than other individuals in the group, and it just becomes this method of tyranny and perhaps even totalitarianism eventually, where there's total control of your life. So that's just kind of a good starting place. And putting the individual as the main focus in society, that has lots of problems too. There's nothing perfect about it. I'm not going to argue that. It's just a way better way to do it than saying, let's let the amorphous collective run things. You know, when you're saying you're just allowing maximum choice for the individual without them causing harm to others. So that's like a good place to kind of just start thinking about it. But communism and fascism, there's so many definitions there about what fascism really is. And I like the definition that says it's a combination of state and corporate interests. And to a degree, something similar can be said about crony capitalism. The same could be said about mercantilism. The same could be said about, and these things, you know, often people will talk about capitalism, but and they think they're talking about the free market. They're talking about this horrible thing where some guy in Washington, D.C. is getting paid by some lobbyist, and he's making rules that are quite oppressive to regular folks and are just totally benefiting the big companies. So right now, what we're going through, I like to call it Corona communism, because I think we ended up with this combination of emerging of government and private interests. And the rationale given was, you know, there's a bug going around. We got to protect people. But the truth is, you know, this is living in former Czechoslovakia. I got to spend a number of years there. I became obsessed with learning about communism, learning about Nazism there, and trying to figure out how did such a prosperous society, because between the wars, it was a prosperous model democracy is what the kind of the globalists were happy to call it. And I became obsessed with this idea of, you know, how does a place so prosperous turn into by late 40s, early 50s, it had elements that were as bad as Stalinism in some regards. And, you know, how does it turn into something so bad, so vile? And this became a topic that I was never able to answer. And I kind of wondered to myself, I'd love, just for curiosity's sake, I'd love to live through a time like that. And Ides of March 2020, I saw that time take place, and I was a little shocked by what took place. But, you know, you can't be shocked by reality. You have to catch up with reality as quickly as you can and just start to understand the element, though, that I learned in Czechoslovakia, looking at World War II, looking at the communist time after World War II, was if you can keep your focus on what are the rights of the individual that are not to be diminished, how do we protect those rights as best as possible, then you never end up sliding into far worse things, no matter what the reason is you're given. During this period of Corona communism, we've been given the right reason for a lot of people. and that shouldn't matter. Either you're a person of principles or you're a person of preferences. And a lot of people showed that there are people of preference, that if they got the right reason, that they in fact have no values.
Yeah. A good friend of mine, Richard Grant, talks about the importance of a moral philosophy and understanding values. Kids don't even understand even think about these things, and we didn't. Even I'm 41 now, and never was a value system or a moral philosophy ever brought up in my childhood. Do you think that part of the problem, the reason why things like fascism, communism are so confusing, that's not by design? So you can't quite grasp what's going on. It's actually just as Cole, there's an overall understanding of your sovereign individual rights are going, but the system is just all confusing anyway. So is that part of it, the confusion?
No question. I agree with you 100% that it is by intent. Very, very simple concepts. I think it's pretty simple to be able to say, is the decision being made going to harm an individual's ability to choose, whether that be, my grandma, whether it be the neighbor, whoever, whether it be someone I like or dislike, what if you're asking that question, that can be kind of a simple equation, to a simple litmus test to work with, but so much effort is made put into confusing people. Economics is too complicated. Just mind your own business, stay in your lane, don't ask any questions, you plebe. And medicine is too complicated. Just stay in your lane, mind your own business, and do what we say. And terrorism is too complicated. You mind your business. War is too complicated. You mind your business. You be quiet. Running the government is too complicated. You're a terrorist if you even want to take part in your how your government's run, and you don't know any better anyway. And then all this kind of professionalism is spread out across society, where if you don't have 8 degrees and 3 different certificates, and you didn't go to the right school to get those certificates, then no. So this is kind of like this simultaneous confusing people, convincing them that they are not worthy of participating, and then convincing them that even if they were to participate, it would make no difference anyway. You don't matter, right? This is such an important message that's being communicated to us, when the reality is every single decision you make matters. Every single moment you make matters. And you have all these immense choices, and it might look like you might just have 1 or 2 choices in front of you, but you have this unlimited potential in this very moment to shift the direction of your future. And this is just so important, and it's so beautiful. And the powers that be don't want you thinking that way.
They twisted it, didn't they? There's a very psychotic thing that they've done here. They've taken your choices and the reasons that the things that you do matter. They've taken that and usurped it and said the things that you do harm others. So they've given you the ability of saying, on one hand, that you are powerful, but you're only powerful enough to hurt someone else. It's a twisted, psychotic version. So how has that happened, where they've gone, you're not responsible for you as an individual. Don't worry about your individual health, but you're responsible for that person. So your harm that you can cause that person is far more important than the harm that can come to you. And that doesn't work. It's like the 2 ends of the battery don't fit together. So what is that then? Because in communism, is that a sort of an inverted version of that? What is that? That's the first time I've ever kind of seen people that they put other people's health in front of their own, to the point where they will give away their human rights as long as they don't feel like they're harming someone else.
That's so, and we can point directly to communism, but I would like to say there's many other theories that fit into it, right? There's this communitarian idea of the collective interest over the individual. And at the root of so many, there's this very meticulous intent to pervert things. And a lot of people, they understand the value of sacrifice. They understand the value of sacrificing for another person, for your child, maybe for a stranger. And there's beautiful things there. And this is just, it's part of our humanity to understand the value of sacrifice. And to some extent in Christian places where there's Christianity, that's part of the value. Many other religions teach that same kind of value of self-sacrifice. So the understanding that so many people have this value, wanting to do good by others, there's this very intentional inversion of it, saying if you do not empower the most vile folks, if you're not empowering the Bill Gates of the world, the Anthony Fauci's of the world, the Klaus Schwab's of the world, if you are not dedicated to empowering them, which is the net impact of following the health mandates, for example, if you are not dedicated to empowering them, you hate your neighbor, you want grandma to die, right? And this is, so it's simply an inversion of taking what are good core values and saying, now, if you don't empower these evil people, then you don't believe in those core values. You are morally ill. And this is, I know some people hearing this are going to think that money is evil, that the marketplace is evil. And I just like to present perhaps a different way of looking at profit, for example, that when you are helping someone and that help is being given voluntarily, they are allowed to pay you voluntarily. When you are helping someone, you make profit, and it's good to help other people. And it's good for there to be systems that encourage that. And this is when you look at the free market, this is how entrepreneurship kind of came to be, that your neighbor needs something, you figure out how to do it for him. And the neighbor's so happy about what you did, he's going to give you a few bucks for it. And before you know it, there's 10 neighbors who want the same thing for you. And then, right, there's then you're hiring someone else to help you do it better. This is a beautiful thing. And instead of this, what's being shoved down our throats is that everyone's got to be a selfless Mother Teresa. And that's the only way that you can be decent in life and be good in life. And on top of it, you have to empower all the Klaus Schwabs of the world. Otherwise, you're just an evil person. When the truth is, it's okay. It's okay to be doing things for money. It's okay to say no to someone who wants to be your tyrant. It's okay to think through these things and say, these public health mandates don't make sense. The CDC in May 2020, the scientists at the CDC in May 2020 were saying face masks don't work, while the political hacks at the CDC were saying everyone mask up. Now that's something for people to think about, and something I talk about in Face Masks for Kids, something I talk about in my last book, Face Masks in One Lesson.
So when you talk about the free market, and that fascinates me as well. What they've done is they've been able to kind of monetize is probably not the right word, but they've been able to kind of like strategize the fact that people will give away their skill set, their time, their attention. And that's part of this virtue signaling, is it not? That the more I suffer, the better person I am. The more I give away, the better person I am. It's a real sick version of help, love thy neighbor. It's gone extremes to the other way. What are you kind of seeing with that? This virtue signaling, this surface level of look how great I am, look how much I suffer. It's a really weird situation, and it's kind of doesn't allow people to prosper. And then that prospering has been repackaged and relabeled as greed.
You just hit on such a neat thing. So Karl Marx, an economist of the second half of the 1800s, middle and second half of the 1800s, he wrote about a thing called, and people throw around the word Marxism, and I don't want to throw around that word right now, because all kinds of people have different feelings about it. But I want to talk about a particular thing that Karl Marx wrote about, which was the labor theory of value. And the labor theory of value says the more time that I spend on an item, the more valuable it becomes. That's kind of, it's oversimplifying, but that's, so if I spend 2 hours making a chair, then obviously it must be more valuable than Richard, who only spends an hour and a half making the chair. But in truth, Richard is more expert. He's more skilled at being able to do it. Richard is a faster worker. Maybe I'm more lazy in the process, whatever it is. That right there, we see this problem with the labor theory of value, that it's not what I put into something that causes it to have value.
I think isn't that bookending it? So what it's doing is mixing off the start where I've put in that example you just gave, whereas I would have put in years of honing my skills. So that time and attention, that value, even though I could do it quicker because I've trained myself to do it quicker. So the value system still works. It's just that needs to be stretched out a bit, maybe.
It is not the value you put into something. it is what it's worth to someone else. So
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
I can talk online for 60 hours, and my 60 hours may or may not be worth more than, I don't know. You know what? Anthony Fauci, we'll do it this way. Anthony Fauci can speak online for 60 hours. Richard and I can speak to each other for 20 minutes and provide more to the viewer than Anthony Fauci would in 60 hours. So this idea of sacrifice that you're speaking of, it's so rooted in our idea that our time is valuable instead of the value we give to someone else being valuable. So you and I agree that the phone in front of me is worth a certain amount of money. That's what it's worth, right? I'll sell you this phone for $100, Richard. No, I wouldn't pay a penny more than 90. Okay, I'll sell it to you for 90. We've just agreed on the price. But there's all kinds of other ways that the world wants to convince us of value. Richard will start saying, well, how many hours did you work to earn that phone? I'm going to pay you a fair price for that. No. Then, so to bring it into what you were saying, we've been so conditioned to look at the world this way that it's easy for us to say the amount of sacrifice I give of myself is how others should value me. No, it's if you're not doing anything for anyone, if you're not doing anything that anyone values, you can spend your whole life in it. You can think it's the highest value thing ever. That's great for you. But if no one else values it, it has no value. And that's the truth.
So this system, these oligarchs, these bloodlines, whatever we want to call them, the value to them of us is how compliant we are, how much we get out of the way of their plan. So they will pay us to be compliant or pay us to get out of the way as long as we're not doing what we're doing and questioning it. We have no value to them because we're in the way. So their value system is the easier it is to get this job done, the better. And whoever allows us to get the job done are of more value to us. And that's why you get your Bill Gates, and that's why you get your multimillionaires. They're being paid for compliance and for helping them to push forward an agenda. We will never get paid that amount because we're not giving them the value that they want, which is not the value that we want. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I will tell you, the part I might disagree with is we will never get paid that. I would like, I've since 2013, I've been active in the Bitcoin industry. I started an exchange. I wrote this book called The Bitcoin Manifesto. That's really like, it goes into some neat free market stuff and it goes into some neat entrepreneurial stuff. And I didn't expect us to go here in this interview, but this is the more we can, even in neat industries like Bitcoin that are kind of, there's all kinds of idealistic people trying to change the world. The more in our own lives, and this is especially true in stale industries, the more in our own lives we can have our own brilliance shine through, and the less we can be under the thumb of someone else, the more kind of potential there is to make income there. And Bill Gates has some sinister stuff in his history, but he figured out a way to use lawyers a lot and to use some stolen programming and to leverage it into like some really awesome stuff for people. And there's lots of bugs in Microsoft software and people can complain about it to no end, but he did the right things to help lots of people use computers better. And that's something worth praising. And I'd like to encourage everyone in this audience to be asking, how can I be that entrepreneur doing that? And it doesn't need to be about making $1 billion. It doesn't need to be about changing the world overnight, but looking at one person at a time and saying, how do I help that person? How can I do something for that person in such a way that person's going to say, man, you helped me so much. I want to give you what you asked for and a little bit more, right? That's the kind of situation we want to be in. Instead of saying money is evil, money is ugly, because what Bill Gates is doing today with money at this point in his life, it's evil, it's ugly. But we shouldn't be convinced to give up on this ability to grow amazing things around us and help others.
Yeah, I mean, we all know his background and how he grew up, and his dad was fairly wealthy. He was head of Planned Parenthood. He had a lot of doors open that maybe me and you wouldn't get open, and that has to be taken into account as well. He wasn't a your average Joe on the street. He was offered a lot of opportunities we weren't. But as you say, he could have sat on his bum, just took his money and never done anything with his life. There is obviously a point somewhere along the line where some videos out of there, he was clearly told to go one way and he didn't really want to go, and he's rocking back and forth with these lawyers. And if you want to watch the videos, he's clearly having some sort of breakdown. So there was a level where he was over here, mate, and he had to sell his soul. But as you say, he's done incredible things that we could possibly learn stuff from, especially in the entrepreneurial business world. And I get that, and I think you can learn from anyone. And so this whole value of this system of people being breaking down now and saying, look, this person, my neighbor, is more important than me, as long as I don't give them the cold that I don't even know if I've got. That's breaking down your self-worth and your self-value. How have you personally kind of ridden through that in your life and kind of kept your self-worth and your self-value to the point where you're doing the work you are today?
You know, when we're talking about opportunities, and it's important to remember. So Thursday, for example, we had a protest at Facebook. It was pretty neat. Facebook headquarters. I'm on the west coast of the U.S. and Robert Kennedy was there. Naomi Wolf was there, and this Tara Thornton from the Freedom Angels, and Kevin Jenkins, one of the dirty dozen of disinformation, or whatever they call these guys. You know, there was a really neat group of people there that I got to speak on stage alongside, and we were kind of speaking out against censorship at Facebook. And a lot of times the censorship conversation, it takes on this like real woe is me, woe is me, Mark Zuckerberg rules the world, what is little old me to do kind of attitude. And to some extent, you know, I get it that these big tech oligarchs are super powerful. But like, if you compare us today, Richard, to 50 years ago, like you and I couldn't be having this conversation across the Atlantic, and who knows how many thousands, maybe millions of people might listen to this. And even no matter how censored Richard is, no matter how censored I am, we still have like this ability to spread our message that people 50 years ago had no capacity to do, where, you know, the printing presses were so owned. It was so expensive to have a printing press, so expensive to access it, so expensive to get ink. And there was really like it was a real privilege to have access to it. And people did. There were small radio stations, small printing presses. So I'm not saying that stuff didn't happen, but generally people, the few dozen people around you were the people you could have influence with or hope to have influence with. And, you know, maybe, possibly, we're more censored than we were 5 years ago. That's possible. But compared to 50 years ago or all human history, we have so much potential to do these amazing things. So like, we got to like stay far away from this, any kind of idea that we can't be in charge here of our own lives, our own destinies. In what happened at Facebook, the message of the protest was really kind of one of accountability a little bit. Like, what are you going to do to fight the censorship in your own life? Instead of, you know, asking Facebook for permission, asking Washington, D.C. for permission, write this law, intervene in this way, please help us, dear master. You know, there's websites like Iconic. There's websites like Naomi Wolf's dailyclout.io. There's Signal, there's Telegram, there's Getter, there's Gab, there's 1,000, 10,000 probably ways to get around censors. I have my website, I have realstevo.com, and it's just a place to sign up for my email newsletter. But it's a way, realstevo.com is a way to like avoid having to use Google to come find me, avoid having to use DuckDuckGo to come find me. There are so many tools at our disposal right now. And those things, any of those things I just mentioned, you might say, well, Telegram is this, Signal is that, and that's okay, right? Things, if we make perfect our standard, then, you know, we're probably always going to be disappointed. I don't know too much perfection in the realm of man, but if we're just looking at our available options and seeking the better option, then there's just so much potential right now. And this is like, you ask me, I had a business in 2020 that Google, I like a lot of what I like to do is around my beliefs, my ideology. So I try not to do stuff just for money. I try to focus on how can I help people? How can I help people around my views? And when I do that, money shows up. And that's a neat thing. And in 2020, Google did not like my views. And I made the mistake of building a business around Google. And I will never do that again. I lost a small fortune. So that censorship very personally harmed me. But what I know now, what I realize now is you only have to do that stuff. If your viewers go to realstevo.com/search, SCARCH,
yep,
they can download a guide even. My team and I did research in 2020. I recognized that this whole narrative was being crammed down our throats using the search engines. Stuff was being held from us. So I went through, how many did we go? 11, 13, I think 13 search engines we went through and did the same search term over and over again, many times in different ways. We figured out what algorithms they were using. And, if your users are still using DuckDuckGo and saying that that's not censored, I want them to go get this report because they're going to get a different side of the story. So that's realstevo.com/search. Or if they're in the US, I have a new trick I'm trying to use to get around the big tech oligarchs. If they're in the US, they can dial this number from their phone. Let's see, they gotta send the word truth to the number 33777. 33777. You send the word truth to that, and then you end up with the same report. So I'm using exciting ways to get around the censorship, just like anyone can be doing.
So I heard you talk about this in your speech, that the event you were just speaking about, and you called it hacking, which I want to come back to because I found that fascinating, using their terminology to kind of put yourself in that mindset. But before we go on, I want to just speak about DuckDuckGo and Google. So which ones were you finding out? And that's going to surprise a lot of people, but they're using DuckDuckGo to kind of figuring out, thinking that they're still there, thinking that it will work. But DuckDuckGo, you said in your speech, was the worst one out of the lot of them, I believe.
Yeah. DuckDuckGo, even Google was less censored than DuckDuckGo in our research. So this is part of, when sometimes people use the term all natural about food, and all natural doesn't really mean anything. It's just like a marketing term. And you have to ask more questions like, well, is it organic? What pesticides were used? Was there GMO feed? Was there soy from China? Was it grass fed? Was it free range? Right? There's all these questions you can ask to kind of dig down to what all natural means. So with the search engines, there are these terms thrown around that are kind of the equivalent of all natural, and they're meant to be like really exciting to people to say, oh, that search engine company really believes in my individual autonomy and wants to be there for me. So, with DuckDuckGo, there's neat stuff about it that it does some things around tracking that are less invasive than what Google does around tracking or what Bing does around tracking. So there's a privacy element to it that's really kind of neat about DuckDuckGo. But a lot of people, they say, oh, privacy, that must mean they're good around censorship too. No, DuckDuckGo, even before this CEO came forward and said, we are censoring disinformation, we're proud of it. Even before he started saying this stuff, they had been censoring for a long time. And a lot of these search engines, they censor. And Google in 1997, I just wrote an article for a website called LouRockwell.com. It's live today. It's something like hating Google for all the wrong reasons, or something like that is the title. In 1997, Google was built on this amazing idea. There was one of its founders, Larry Page, came up with an algorithm. And the goal of the algorithm was, how do I give someone searching the internet anything that they want? How do I figure out what they want and give it to them? And this is just an amazing, empowering idea. And for like I don't know, 15, 16 years, that was what Google was really kind of operating on. And come 2015, a different element in the company had taken over. And it was not, how do I give the user what the user wants, which is, it really, Google began to change the world, and that algorithm can still be used to change the world. Instead, though, I don't think it's going to come from Google, though. Google shifted and said, instead of how do I give the person searching what he wants, it started saying, how do I give the person searching what I want him to see? Right? And this is an evil kind of shift in Google. So we do need to have a little bit of understanding of what's going on at these companies to really understand these search engines. But DuckDuckGo, for censorship, it's a bad one. Basically, the big ones are bad ones. And if any of your viewers want to dig into that report a little bit more, it's realstevo.com/search, and they can download it right away.
That's good. I'll put the links below. So in a sense, it's kind of like a two-edged sword, I suppose, is that by a search engine kind of trying to guess what you want, in a sense of like feeding off what you've put in there, they're actually censoring anyway by getting rid of the other results. So it can't not be censorship. It has to be some sort of censorship in a sense, because you're asking them to provide a service, which is to get rid of all the guff that you don't want. Yeah. Which in itself will get rid of your choices, and it's a trade-off, is it not?
Yeah. And this, Yahoo was started as an indexing site. It had a different kind of, it was like an index of lists kind of. So it had a different kind of goal than what Google came along to do. And Google, so even what you're talking about, I agree with you. There's always someone deciding what's good and what's bad. Google initially said to itself, if Richard is searching, we want Richard to be able to decide what's good or bad. Its
intentions changed. So its intentions shifted at some point.
Totally. And in that Google, Richard, in that report, I know some people don't like to, it's like 25 pages long. Some people don't like to read all that. So right on the first page, I list out those, let's see, I think it's two good search engines I list out. I know it's 2 good search engines, but I think it's 11 or 13 bad search engines I list out. I call them by name. And then the rest of the report is why they're so bad or so good.
And this is going to be the case with anything that you kind of want. If you don't want to go out into the world and get it yourself, you're going to have to deal with some sort of filtering system. And that filtering system is going to provide you with that person or that company's or that corporation's idea of what you want. So is there an element of trying to be a bit more mature about this and a bit more grown up about how the world actually works, and not kind of like stamping your feet and going, well, I don't want that. Don't know what I want, but I definitely don't want that. There's a kind of like an infantilization of humanity at the moment. We're going, okay, we want all these toys and everything we've got. And look, I've got a globe there. Don't need that. Don't know why I got that. But we also want to say that we're being mistreated. Well, I don't live in a hut made of fecal matter in the burning desert. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, there is a kind of infantilization of it, and a bit of a stroppy child kind of element to this as well, I believe.
Yeah. And this, I like that you're saying, grow up, man up, toughen up, because this is, the more we can look that way and say, I am accountable, I am responsible. The more you can say, how did something bad happens? What role did I play in that bad thing happening, right? Even you're a victim in a situation. Perhaps you played some small role in some way. If you can't acknowledge that, you can't change that behavior in the future. So you got to start like there, where's my accountability? Where's my personal responsibility? If you can start with that, like a lot of neat things can grow out of that. And what you're describing right there, that infantilizing, a lot of people are comfortable being infantilized, living on the couch for a long time, not having a lot of drive. And it's a very different era we live in than I spoke about 50 years ago. 50 years ago was different. And, 100 years ago was very different, and very different things were expected of us. And right now we have such low standards expected of us. And I like to say that to be an adult, you need to identify your boundaries, to communicate your boundaries, and to defend your boundaries. And that a great deal can be said about what I just said, but this is really like, and that's the same as saying identify your values, communicate your values, defend your values. Richard, I believe in this. Now let's talk about it. I won't let you in front of me. I won't let you do this, Richard. Now let's talk about it. Richard, that is not okay what you just did. That can't happen again in front of me, right? This kind of, I know these can be hard conversations to have, but this is really what being an adult, especially in the civil society, is about. And this is our freedom is so built around this ability to have this conversation. And I write about, I've been writing about topics of personal liberty for better than 15 years, almost 20 years. And when the lockdown started to come, February 2020, March 2020, April 2020, people writing me things, I can get through these lockdowns, but this face mask, what am I going to do about the face mask? So many people kept writing me this over and over again. And we figured out, in Arizona, this works. In France, this is working. In New Hampshire, this works. And this approach doesn't seem to work anywhere. And, we started to kind of come up with best practices. This hundreds of people emailing me, we would communicate back and forth. And this turned into this book, Face Masks in One Lesson, that came out that November 2020. And it's kind of like, it presents a way to never wear a face mask again. And then it takes 5 minutes to read that part. And then the rest of it explains, at the airport, in the grocery store, at the barber, at the doctor, what does this mean? How do you apply it? And the idea, I want people to not be forced to wear face masks. That's obvious. But there's something so much more important going on. It is this ability to have this conversation to say, I'm not going to tolerate that. This is my value. And I give people all these kind of workarounds, these training wheels for the bicycle, these exemptions to say, well, I'm medically exempt. That's not safe for me, right? You can have that kind of conversation. I'm unable to wear a face mask safely is the line I encourage. And no one has to be wearing a face mask anymore. These things work. You can really negotiate these situations, but those are just training wheels. Where we really need people is to be able to have these conversations with others where they're saying, this does not work for me. And where people perhaps even end up, in a parallel society, perhaps. Maybe it doesn't end up there, but being able to have these conversations where they're first identifying their values, then communicating their values to others. And then if that doesn't work out, to be able to defend their values, which might be as simple as saying no or walking away or saying, move out of my way.
Yep. Well, I liked what you said about accountability. So the accountability also, going back to that little point before, is not the same as blame. So when we're saying that you are the victim of something, it doesn't mean that you are to blame for it. It means that you're taking accountability for how it's affected you and how you're going to move away from that. Don't go near that person again. Don't let them in your sphere, part boundaries. The accountability is not the same as blame. And I think a lot of people get those two mixed up and then get defensive. So I just like to put that point across. It's not that you're to blame. If you're the victim of abuse, you're the victim of abuse, but you are accountable for getting that, not allowing it to happen again, if you can do so. But what you were saying there as well about what I noticed as well, and get your point on this, and it'll come back to what you were saying about the masks, is that a lot of people really liked on a subconscious level, maybe not so subconscious, the idea of being locked down. It was like they didn't have to be accountable for anything and they could crawl back into the womb. And the mask situation was, I wanted to put the mask on because they didn't have to face up to anything. They could hide. Yeah. It gave everybody the opportunity to disappear and hide from the reality and the harshness of being an adult. Did you see anything along them lines? I'd like to get your take on that.
In January 2020, a friend said to me, very wise man, he said, Stevo, they're being so crazy. They're talking so crazy. They have so many ideas in their head about what reality is, that they're so burdened by all the garbage that they're carrying around. And they just have to make so many excuses in their life about how that garbage is actually true and palatable. And he didn't even say who they is. I think that there's plenty of people you can look around and figure out, maybe they might apply, that they might fit into that they, but he felt so many lies happening. And he said, something's got to give, Stevo. And that was January 2020. And I tossed that around a little. And this is really like, you can look at 2020 as, you can say it's all evil, that no good came out of it. But I don't believe that. I think, even even for the people who like carrying that garbage, all those lies around with them, they at least got a reprieve, right? They got to go back into that womb. And I find so little value. I find it just practically disgusting that someone would need to retreat into a womb instead of living life honestly. But you know, I'm not walking in their shoes. And you know, maybe they need a break, whatever. I agree with you. I think the lies that have been created are so burdensome and so constant that it really wears on some people. And some people would prefer to go hide, to go watch Netflix for 16 hours a day than to actually do the amazing things. I mean, imagine the life you can live where, you know, you can live a life where people want to make movies about you one day, but instead you choose to give up and go sit on the couch and watch movies. And it's not just movies. The same happens with YouTubes. Some people, you know, once you get what's going on, maybe it's time to stop watching all day. And to some extent that affects me. In many of my books, I write a few pages into it. Now, if you get what I'm saying, please close the book and go do this. Like at some point there's, you know, you put your life on hold almost, and treat information as entertainment. Now, what happened in 2020 is something worth fighting for, is fighting against. And you know, there's programs like this that are giving that vital information, giving that vital perspective. And I want to encourage your listeners to see the many positives that have likely come from 2020, where people who weren't standing up for themselves learned to stand up for themselves again. People who had people around them who just didn't really comport with their values, those people were allowed to kind of continue rotating around them. 2020 made it so hard to let a lot of people just continue to rotate around you. And these are, I mean, I think I will forever be thankful for the things that came out of 2020 that benefited me while disliking some of the vile things.
Yeah, it gave everyone an opportunity, and it always does. It always does, gives you an opportunity to step forth, but you have to step forth. And you said a lot of people did take the opportunity, and you rightly said there are different reasons. We all have our different reasons for hiding away, but it gave people opportunity. It's like the fight or flight response, CPTSD. People flighted and they hid, and they did. Some people got angry and came out. Some people hid. Maybe, and sometimes the anger was directed into things like Black Lives Matter with George Soros, and they knew some of the anger was going to come out. They directed it off into Black Lives Matter and some other sort of things like the Extinction Rebellion. They tried to use that energy and control that whilst having everybody else being that way. It's so clever, this social engineering. But once you understand psychology and you understand that actually narcissism is a huge thing, to understand cluster B personalities, you'll understand all of this, what was going on. But a lot of people did go back into the womb. A lot of people did stay there, and although it was an opportunity for them to learn and come back out, now they're trying to go back, drag us back in again. And you're having all of these left wings, and I'll say the left wings because it's the only way I can put something on it that people understand. At the moment, it's as best I can do. They want to go back in. It's almost like, hang on a minute, we want to go back in, unless it's all monkeypox. Let's go back in with the monkeypox. Or let's go back in with anything else, Ukraine, Russia, anything to go back in. We need to go back in. And now and that feeds in, does it not, to the World Economic Forums? You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. The nothing that you will own is a value system or any responsibility or no accountability, but you'll be happy. And when the only time you've had no accountability or no responsibility? When you're a fucking toddler. And that's kind of what we're getting back to, isn't it? They're trying to make people into helpless children. What is your take on that view?
You know, you just gotta, one of the goals of life is taking on as much responsibility as you can, as much accountability as you can, for people to look at you and to want to give you more work, to give you more responsibility, to put more blame on you, to say, and this, men especially, in the movement I am a part of, there are so many women standing up, and I see so much silence from men. I'm sorry to say, men especially. I understand how this era wants to make men feel feeble, but men especially need to be ready to say, I want more responsibility. I want everyone in the room. I want to be the guy who everyone in the room blames when something goes wrong. That's the kind of guy I want to be. And you know what? That hurts sometimes, and that's a heavy burden sometimes, but I get to live that life that so many people look to me as a leader. So many people look to me as someone with potential that I get to get blamed when something bad goes wrong. You know what? That's a gift. Instead, we're being convinced, oh, no one should say anything hurtful. Do you ever feel bad? Life should be so simple and easy. But there's nicer virtues to life sometimes than easiness. And this, you know, this is there's things about religion that it can feel like blame instead of accountability. And there's nice things when people look to you and say, I want you to be more accountable. And you don't have to feel, you made such a good distinction there, Richard. You don't have to feel like someone's blaming you when they're saying, listen, you're the one I turn to. You're the accountable one. I need you to step up. And this is what every adult needs to be stepping up right now. The hour is late and we can win this. The tools are at our disposal. And especially men need to be stepping up right now, because I see so many men just sitting on the couch, going back to the womb, and that's not the right place for them.
It's absolutely true. And I've had, you're not the only person who said that. A lot of people have been saying exactly the same thing to you. The men didn't turn up here. And not only the men, like in the sexes men, the masculinity or the male part of the man was kind of pushed down. Even in women, it seemed to be more prevalent in women than it did men. That's been done on purpose. We see the transhumanist agenda. We see this kind of everybody talking about mansplaining, and that was kind of done chip away at the defense. And there was nothing left there when this all rolled out in 2022. And it's so ridiculous. If you look at the people, and I'll get your take on this, the Bill Gates of the world, the Jeff Bezos of the world, even the Zuckerbergs of the world, they're all quite, I wouldn't call them masculine men. They're the type of people at school who probably were the hall monitors. They're not the kind, but if you met them in the street, you wouldn't go, oh, fucking hell. You would go, piss off. And they tapped into that. So if you're going to do what someone like a Mark Zuckerberg tells you what to do, how much self-worth are you going to have? Because if you met him in real life, you just think, piss off. But you know what I mean? It's all kind of very, very disturbing.
You know, there's a professor, let's see, he's out of Hillsdale College. I think his name's Burton Folsom, I think his name is. And he wrote a book called, it was like maybe 15, 20 years ago. It was called something like the myth of the robber baron or something like that. And I'd like to just kind of give an idea that he presents there, which I think is maybe a good way to look at it. Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. He draws a distinction. Just because someone runs a rich and powerful company does not make that person bad. That person may be, he draws the distinction, market entrepreneur or political entrepreneur. And the political entrepreneur is going to government saying, hey, give me special favors, give me special advantages, protect me, take care of my, get rid of my competition, force the people to buy only from me, things, right? All these things like this. This is what a political entrepreneur is doing. And this person's leeching off of society. It looks like a business, but they're leeching off of society, really. And, you know, they have this imprimatur of, oh, I'm a good capitalist, and you know, they can go to the free market folks and say, see, I build the marketplace. But in truth, they're using the force of government to make others bend to their will. And there's some people who need that, who need the government to protect their screwy ideas and to enforce their screwy ideas. Then there's other people, and a lot of these folks, they start out that way. A lot of entrepreneurs start out that way. The market entrepreneurs are saying, how do I help Richard? How do I help Richard's listeners? How do I make life better for others? And so in this, you know, when we're looking at these kind of soy boy entrepreneurs, it's worth kind of asking this question: are they using government to take advantage of you, me, or are they just trying to do their best to help those people who are voluntarily willing to receive their help, voluntarily willing to give them money. And this is powerful. This conversation we're having, Richard, we started with, do they, forgive me, a call just tried to come through. I thought
okay. No worries.
I thought I did the do not disturb.
Okay.
This conversation we're having, it's very much, we started with, are they trying to confuse us? And yes, and you don't need to be confused. And we've just had a conversation about like some really like simple basic values. What are your values? And if you don't know, be focused on that. Try to determine your values. How do you communicate the values to others? If you don't know, just start with baby steps. It could be as simple as taking off that face mask. That's an opportunity, the face mask. It's training ground. And then, defend your values. What does that look like? If you're not doing it a little bit, it's time to do it. Try to get as much authority as much accountability as you can in life. And that might be, you don't need to take on the whole world all at once. What are the little baby steps towards accountability? And as you grow those muscles, you get better. In the United States, and I know it's happened in England, when 9/11 came in the United States, government said, children, go to your bedroom. We've got this. And largely people complied. And for 20 years, people stayed in their bedroom. And you can't expect somebody who's laid in bed for 20 years to get up and run a marathon. And to expect that of someone is surely going to leave them feeling defeated. But what you can expect of someone is to do the change that is within their reach.
It's a good point as well, is because a lot of this thing, and I saw this in the self-development world. I worked in that for a while, making video content for that. There was all these entrepreneurs coming out, a lot of NLP and a lot of madness going on in there. But the weird thing was these people trying to change the world and make these big corporations and trying to be the next Mark Zuckerberg and trying to be this big famous. It was odd, but they weren't capable of being anything small. It was this urge to be, I don't know, entre famous. It was really odd. It was this urge to, I can change the world, or I can make the world different, but not realizing that they weren't even attending to their home life. It was this very odd twisting of needing to kind of look a certain way, be a certain way. And it's this, obviously social media is coming to that, but people aren't. 30 years ago, before the internet come around, people were tending to their home life. What happened? There's a sickness now where people want to be their avatars. They're far more invested in what their online persona is and what they're actually doing with their life. Do you think people, young kids, maybe, I must say young kids in their 20s and below, feel like if they didn't have an online presence, they wouldn't exist at all? Is it an existential crisis? That's a good one, and I could see how that really serves some ugly interest if kids are convinced of that. And I don't want to glorify an online presence when I bring up this example, but what you said leading into that was, not focusing on helping the individual, but looking at this big picture, trying to have this big impact. The first time you, Richard, sat down to do a recording, the first time you wrote something out, the first time, who knows, you did something the first time, whatever that looked like, there was probably no one listening, one person listening. You didn't know how many people would listen. And you built it into, this quite sizable audience. And it started somewhere. And these things start with looking at one person or two people and saying, how do I impact that person's life? And your listeners, if you're an activist, I would like to beg you to be focused on yourself first, to be focused on your family after that, your home life, and to be focused on the community only after that. To not worry so much, unless you live in Davos, about what's going on in Davos. I know those are important things to be aware of, but one way that we are belittled and enfeebled is by only focusing on that stuff. And we need to know the big picture. We need to know what's going on. I get it. But you can change the world around you as you know it. Just
being you, being that person seeking to have more accountability, being that person seeking to know their values better, communicate their values better, defend their values better in the world around you. And it's got to start with you. You can't be plenty of activists. They point at someone else when it's the exact same thing. They got the exact same work they have to be doing on themselves. You got to be changing yourself. That's the only person you can change. Then you got to be helping that home, keeping that home in order, keeping that family in order. Then it's okay to go out to the community. Seldom is there a good reason to obsess. And many people, I bet anyone listening to this knows many people who spend 6-8 hours watching videos about Klaus Schwab. And Klaus Schwab doesn't care who you are. I don't know Klaus Schwab. I don't care who he is, but I know I can change the world around me, and I do every day, and it's amazing.
It's totally strange, isn't it? How we kind of get locked into these things as well. How we want to go from there is I want to talk about how, like what you mentioned with me with doing the podcast and doing now working with David and the Iconic guys as well. My interest was always, I don't understand this. Let me speak to people who can teach me what this is. I never put myself out there as someone who knows any of this stuff. It's always that these people know, let me learn with you, because I haven't got, I'm obviously amassed a lot of knowledge over the years of doing it, but I was always in the seat of just trying to ask questions because I don't understand. It's a genuine interest in stuff I don't understand. That's why I asked you about communism at the start, because I often go, I still can't figure it out sometimes. But when you kind of look at a value system, I still don't think people understand even what that means. I don't think they get it. I don't think they've ever give it a thought. I don't think they've even understand what a moral philosophy is. What would you say is a value system for someone who's watching this going, okay, I need a value system. I don't even understand what a value system or a value is.
Okay. If I don't know how popular this is going to be with your audience. If you grew up in Europe and you're feeling lost, go get the Bible and read it. And I have spent many years of my life not liking the Bible, saying the worst things about the Bible, spreading the most vitriolic atheism. And one day, I still read the Bible. I said, you know what? What if I spend time watching Hollywood movies where I let these creep, pedophile, pervos into my head for 2 hours to do whatever, who knows what they're even doing in there? Who knows what kind of techniques they've learned I let them in my head for 2 hours. And I do, Samuel Taylor Coleridge in the early 1800s wrote that all good literature provokes in the reader a temporary suspension of disbelief. I allow a temporary suspension of disbelief when I watch Hollywood films. And one day I was reading the Bible and I said, you know what? What if I pretended like it was real? And before I knew it, I started believing it. But you don't have to do that. If you feel at a loss for values, it is because there are many people who have worked very hard to help you feel that way. The way you take down a civilization is by causing the young especially to feel demoralized, and then to tire out the wise older folks so that they don't have the ability to spread that wisdom. If you're feeling at a loss, the Bible is a neat tool full of wisdom. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to believe it. It is so full of it. It's so full of wisdom. You can't just say to yourself, this thing means nothing. There's value. And there's lots of people in churches that are the most woke, evil globalists ever, doing all kinds of nasty stuff. Don't pay too much attention to them. There's lots of value still. You can find places with value. There are churches. You can find values in the Bible. That's one great place. For me, that was very impactful for me to start to recognize where I was lacking in my values. But it can just start. When you say value system, it can just start with a, and I bring up the Bible. I got a Bible right here next to me. That's why I'm pointing there. I bring up the Bible because this is, for whatever reason, that's part of the culture that developed in Europe. And you can come up with all kinds of sinister ways of doing it. And if you live in a place with a different kind of religion, maybe that's better for you. I don't know. I'm gonna let you choose. I know the right answer to that, but I'm gonna let you guys choose that. I don't want to impose anything on you. There's all kinds of values that don't exist on the TV. If you can turn off the television, look away from popular culture and its distractions, and you can say, what do I really believe in my heart? What do I know to be true? Somewhere in there, you're going to find a value that you can stand on.
So the values, just before we go, we can tie it back to the start when we talked about entrepreneurship and understanding like the free market and what other people value. So how could you prosper in this world if you didn't know what was valuable to you and what was valuable to others? How is that the crucial understanding of giving the world some meaning, and your purpose here, some meaning, is values and morals?
There is so much work to be done right now. And, you know, if you can look to people you respect and say, what does that person need? How can I help that person? Right there, you know, you're asking questions of people, you're watching them. What can I be doing for that person? And in terms of economic value, if you're answering that question, you are going to be providing economic value, and there's money to be had. I do in my own life a tremendous amount of my time. I write books like Face Masks Hurt Kids. I have a bunch of books behind me that I've written. I do trainings. I have this website, realstevo.com. I go and do interviews. I give speeches. I do activism. I go up and down the West Coast of the U.S. training groups. And all my time is not all my time. So much of my time is spent saying, how do I provide value to others? How do I provide encouragement in these difficult times? How do I make sure I'm that daily voice? You sign up for my email newsletters, you're gonna get a daily voice of encouragement. Some people don't want a daily email. You sign up, you're gonna get a daily email from me. And some of it might be accountability. It's gonna be real encouraging though. I don't believe in leaving people down in the dumps. I do not like when people get a whole lot of the hard truth, and then they don't feel capable of doing anything. And this question, there's so much opportunity, and if you sign up for my newsletter, you don't feel like there's any opportunity around you, shoot me an email response saying, I don't know what to do. If that really describes you, I'd be happy to help you figure out, where there might be opportunity for you. But there's lots of good people being discouraged from acting, and it can really be as simple as figuring out who around you needs what people you believe in around you need what. And it doesn't need to be centrally planned. The whole world functions in this way, like people just looking and saying, I'm hungry, I need food, what can I do for someone else? And it works, and it's worked for like a long, long time, and it's pretty neat. And no matter what Klaus Schwab says, it's still going to keep working. And it worked in the worst totalitarian environments where black markets still existed and people still smuggled cool things across borders, and it's going to keep working. And they can't control us. There's a possibility it can be more total control than was known in the worst times of the past, because there's so much technology around us that can be used to watch us and monitor us, control us. But there's so much technology we can use to just say, no, you're not going to control me. And it is really, it was easy for me to build a business around Google. That was the easy thing. But like I said, sometimes there's more important virtues than easiness. And you don't have to choose the easy. You can choose the censorship proof. You can choose the privacy friendly. You can choose whatever value you want, because there's so many entrepreneurs trying to figure out how to make you happy. And there's probably some kind of system out there for you that is more in line with your values. And if there isn't, then it's a great time to build it, because so much potential exists that never existed before.
So before we go, because I'm going to ask you next time, is obviously the next question. I wanted to get your emails and everybody get the information to get hold of you. But before we go, I wanted to ask you, what value do you get out of doing the work that you've just mentioned, going up and down the coast and speaking to people? What is the value that you get out of doing this work?
I know. I'm in a special situation. California is, many people have left California. If I step out my front door, it does not look like a place anyone would want to live. And it's in a major American city, in a nice part of a major American city. And I recognize that this California has so much natural resources, and it is so impoverished in so many ways. It's insane. And it is by design, and it's the design intended for the United States. It's the design intended for the world. And I know I get to live this moment at the spear tip. I get to live. That's how I get to live. And I get to help wake up other lions. I get to encourage other warriors. Throughout all history, there have been these hyena-like people who they've existed with the goal of trying to take advantage of others, manipulate others, try to cause ill in the world. And those people, they really don't deserve your attention, because they don't determine the arc of history. And those people, they could be Anthony Fauci right now. They could be Bill Gates right now. They could be elected officials who you just think are vile. And they might be people you know personally in your life, but those people don't determine the trajectory of history. Then there's the big mass of people, and they tend to behave kind of sheep-like. And sometimes people derogatorily call them sheep, and they're skittish, and they're scared, and they don't know who to believe, and they're just looking around for the right leader, and they'll follow the right leader, and they might follow you one day, and then they don't determine the trajectory of history. Those two I've just described are constants throughout history. The variable, the uncertainty is in the lion. It is. Will the Richards of the world be awake? Will the people who know better be awake, or will they choose to be asleep? And the lion doesn't even have to walk around trying to do good for others. The lion spreads freedom just by being awake, just by walking around the world. He walks around the world in a certain way and behaves a certain way, and freedom just like bubbles out from him. And this is such a beautiful thing. So like I kind of go around, I write, I spend my time waking up other lions. And I don't spend too much time talking about the sheep. I don't spend too much time talking about the hyenas. Those I like to keep abreast of what they're doing once in a while. But I just like to wake up lions. And I like to have those lions around me. It benefits my freedom. I know it provides for the future of the place I live in. And it energizes me to hear their stories of adventure. And I know I am in a special place with a special skill set where I get to just spend my time waking up lions.
It's a great analogy. I absolutely love that. That's fantastic. So where can people find you and get in contact with you?
The best way is the website realstevo.com. You won't find much there. You're going to find a sign up, and you sign up and you get some information about how to stop wearing face masks, and you end up on my daily newsletter. You'll get emails from me every day. And if for whatever reason you don't get an email every day from me, you can trust that I'm slacking. I'm falling asleep on the job. But that's, I have many ways that I've built to help people get through these things and to avoid all this censorship. So I have lots of ways to get a hold of me, and going through that website will get you in touch with a lot of them. So I think that's a good way. And if you ever hear anything discouraging from me that doesn't end with some way you can take action and get excited, then I want you to hold me to account and say, hey, I don't, the whole world, when I have my organizing meetings, I don't let people tell the stories they find on Fox News, the conservative channels. I don't let the people tell the stories they find in the New York Times, the liberal channels. I don't want to hear them. I can go to those places if I want to hear their depressing stories about how the world's going to be conquered by the next flavor of the day. I don't want to hear the depressing stories. I want to hear the exciting stories of action, risk taking, the heroism they've shown in their own lives. These are the stories I ask people to tell me. I don't need the rest. So my various channels of communicating with people, they take that perspective. I don't need to You have so many ways that are meant to depress you, demoralize you. I don't need to be another one. I'm here. I want to be your daily voice through all that other noise that helps you to say, no, I got this. We got this. We're winning. Look at all the craziness they're spewing. Only crazy people who are losing would be saying some of the things they're saying. We're winning. I have no question about that.
Well, it's fantastic. Thank you for your time, Alan. And I'll put all the links below. So guys, do check out the links below and we'll speak to you in a week's time. Take care. Goodbye.
Your call is important to us.
Hello and welcome to tonight's show.
You've arrived at your destination. Connecting.